The unclaimed house on Mahogany Street. A chill descends, not from the air, but from the realization that some places are not merely structures of wood and concrete. They are vessels of memory, and sometimes the memories belong to someone else. Imagine a house, newly purchased, smelling faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. It stands solid and proud on a quiet street. Now, picture that same house a few weeks later, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a street lamp. Inside, a new mother, Alara, lies in bed. She is not resting, she is dissolving. Her skin is pale, her body swollen, and a creeping, incomprehensible horror begins to manifest. Maggots, not from an open wound, but emerging from her very flesh, a feast prepared where no injury exists. What force is so possessive, so ancient, that it can claim a life by simply refusing to share the space a person calls home? I'm Reed, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. Is the allure of the new beginning. This story comes to us from Leon, who shared a deeply personal and unsettling account of her family's struggle against an unseen presence after moving into a new home. It's a tale that roots itself in one of the most persistent and terrifying beliefs in Filipino folklore, that the land itself, or the dwelling built upon it, is already owned. Not by a legal deed, but by something far older and more powerful. Leon's parents, Emil and Elara, were just starting their family. They had built their first house, a modest but beloved home where their elder children were raised. But like so many Filipinos who dream of providing more, they bought a second property. It was a larger house on Mahogany Street, a place they hoped would be a step up, a symbol of their hard work. Leon was the youngest, a newborn when they moved, a new life to christen a new home, but the welcoming only lasted a few days. Almost immediately after moving, Elara's health plummeted. It wasn't a common postnatal sickness, it was a rapid, aggressive deterioration. She was plagued by extreme fatigue, followed by a swelling of her body that doctors could not explain. Her condition was baffling. This is where the story shifts from a simple illness to something truly dark. The whispers started immediately. The neighbors on Mahogany Street spoke in hushed, regretful tones. The house, they said, had a history, a grim, repeated cycle. Walada dan tumira, ninehina tahena mat isa sabwat pamulya. No family had ever lived there without losing one of their own. This is the power of local superstition, a form of communal memory. When medical science fails to provide an answer, we turn to the shared wisdom, or dread, of the community. Emil, the father, was a practical man, a provider. He dismissed the talk. He believed in doctors and diagnoses, in the tangible world. But the tangible world was failing his wife. The unseen infestation. Elara's symptoms grew worse. She wasn't just sick, she was besieged. The swelling continued, and then came the manifestation that defied all logic, the maggots. They were not from an external source, not from a neglected injury. Leanne's account is clear. They were in her, appearing on her skin, yet there were no open wounds to host them. Imagine the absolute terror of this. A biological impossibility. A violation that suggests not just disease but a supernatural corruption, a kind of decay initiated from within, or perhaps from an external, unseen source. Emo rushed his wife to every hospital he could, both local and in distant provinces. Each time the results were the same, no identifiable sickness. The tests were clean, the blood work normal, the x-rays clear. Medically, Elara was fine, but physically, she was dying. In the face of this scientific dead end, the old beliefs roared back. The elders in the community were insistent. Dalhin ang mama mo sa albulario. Take your mother to the folk healer. They believed Elara was being played with, napaglaruan, by an encanto, an elemental being, or some malevolent spirit that had claimed the property. Emil resisted. It is a very common conflict, the modern, educated Filipino against the deeply entrenched ancient belief system. But as his beloved wife's body failed her for no medical reason, his resolve began to crumble. The shadow guests. As Alara's condition reached its crisis point, the unseen guests of the house became visible, not to the family, but to those outside. After a final, desperate hospital trip that yielded the same frustrating nothingness, Ilara and Emil returned home. But the neighbors approached Emil with worried, frightened eyes. They reported seeing people standing inside the house when the family was out. Not ordinary people. They were described as wearing nakachinanang, did diamond-scripted anklings, ancient traditional clothing, or what some interpreted as parang nakachinis, did a suggestion of older, possibly pre-colonial or earlier colonial era clothing, perhaps silk robes or embroidered gowns. They were standing there, watching. They were the landlords, and they were checking on their new, unwanted tenants. This is a recurring motif in global folklore, the genius loci, or spirit of the place. In the Philippines, this often manifests as a territorial encanto, or anito, ancestral spirit, who resides in a specific tree, rock, or, critically, a dwelling. The new house was not vacant, it was occupied. The sudden, inexplicable illness of Alara was not a sickness, it was an eviction notice. The reports of the spectral figures finally broke Emil's practicality. The scientific world had failed. The evidence of the eyes, even the eyes of strangers, was undeniable. He was ready to try anything. The albulario's warning. The next day, Emil took Ilara to an albulary, a traditional Filipino folk healer. This was a Hail Mary pass, a surrender to the ancient forces that governed Filipino life alongside Catholicism and modern medicine. The albulary was near, just a short tricycle ride away. When they arrived, the albulary did not need to be told the story. He simply looked at Ilara, and he knew. His diagnosis was terrifyingly specific. May kasama sila na hindi nila nakikita. You have companions you cannot see. These were women, the spirits the neighbors had seen. They were described as wearing the ancient clothing and chillingly high-heeled shoes, nakatakong na parang sinalona, suggesting a specific, almost fashion-conscious antiquity that adds a strange layer of detail to the haunting. The spirits were angry. The Oblulargio stated directly, the house has an original owner who is furious and refuses to let go. The message was an ultimatum. Omalis nachamirayil nagarit agmismonglay galit angebachai. They must leave, because the owner of the house is angry. But again, Emil hesitated. Perhaps the practicality of securing another place, the financial strain, or a final kernel of disbelief made him balk. He was a man drowning, clinging to the last piece of driftwood. He didn't fully believe the words, but the sight of his wife, dying without a cause, compelled him. The final summons. The spirits were done waiting for Emil's agreement. They moved from the house to the dreams, and finally the conscious reality of Ilara. The day after the albulario's warning, Ilara began to speak of them. She was calling out things she saw. Kung ano na inimik. She spoke of being fetched, sinusundo, by the woman in the ancient dress. And in a final, heartbreaking image, she spoke of the woman offering her flowers in a bowl, a classic spectral gesture of invitation to join the spirit world, a beautiful but deadly summons. When Emil returned from checking on their first house, the one they still owned, the one that was safe, he found Ilara had deteriorated further. She was soaking wet, basang basa, and the horror was everywhere. The maggots were worse, covering her body, yet still inexplicably, without a single wound. The decay was not just setting in, It was aggressively manifesting a terrible, supernatural end. The sight broke Emil completely. The albulario was right. The neighbors were right. Science was wrong. He gave the order. They had to leave. The family quickly packed what they could and hailed a rented tricycle to take them back to the safety of their first home, the one they had built themselves. But it was too late. In the back of the tricycle, somewhere between Mahogany Street and the old neighborhood, Elora was gone. She died in transit, leaving behind a husband who had fought a war he couldn't see, and children who barely knew their mother. And even in death, the horrifying supernatural signature of her illness remained. Inuodo pero walang shugat. Infested with maggots, but without wounds. This is a dark echo of global death lore. In many cultures, a death marked by unnatural decay, rapid decomposition, or infestation is a sign that the soul was not taken by a benign force, but was claimed by something malicious, preventing the body from resting normally. Echoes in the dark. In the aftermath of the tragedy, as the family gathered for Elora's wake, the older siblings and aunts began to piece together the strange events that happened while Lane was a newborn. Leon was too young to remember, but the stories shared at the wake confirmed the malevolent presence. Her aunts and siblings recounted their own experiences in the house on Mahogany Street. The sisters mentioned that when they were babies, they too saw the women standing inside the house, when no one else was home. Her older siblings had experienced the auditory haunting. Tuwing gabedo, paradao may nagluluto, sa kusina, na tutunogan ang mangkok kait wala namang, tao sa kusina. Every night it sounded like someone was cooking in the kitchen, with bowls clattering, even though no one was there. These are classic auditory hallucinations, or, in folklore, the sounds of domestic spirits, the genius loci performing their daily routines, asserting their continued claim on the home. They were making dinner in their kitchen, and the living family was just an inconvenient disturbance. After Ilara was buried, Emil and the children never looked back. They returned permanently to their first house, the one they had built, the one that was truly theirs. And there, Leon concludes, wala kaming naramdaman na kakaiba. They felt nothing strange. The terror is tied to a single, cursed piece of property. The cultural and psychological layers. Leon's story is a chilling example of what happens when cultural beliefs intersect with inexplicable tragedy. Theological and psychological perspectives. From a theological standpoint, this is a crisis of faith versus tradition. Emil's initial rejection of the albulario is a very modern, often Catholic-influenced stance that sees folk belief as pagan or superstitious. But when modern science fails, people instinctively return to the older paths. The inexplicable nature of Elara's illness, the maggots without wounds, pushes the rational mind to its breaking point, forcing a surrender to the supernatural. Psychologically, the community's belief in the house's curse created a powerful nocebo effect. The moment the family moved in, they were already marked by the local belief that someone would die. While this doesn't explain the physical manifestation of the maggots, the psychological stress on Elara, knowing she was living in a cursed house, could have compounded her postnatal health issues, potentially leading to a rapid physical decline. Comparative folklore. The Filipino concept of a house being claimed by an older spirit is mirrored globally. In Japan, you have the Zashiki Warushi, a protective child spirit who often lives in old homes. In European folklore, the brownie or hob is a helpful domestic spirit. The critical difference here is the malevolence. These Filipino spirits are territorial and vengeful, reminiscent of the Irish banshee or certain West African mamiwata spirits, who lure or claim the unwary who trespass on their domain. The use of maggots as a supernatural signature is particularly dark. This form of magical infestation has parallels in voodoo or hoodoo traditions, where a curse is meant to cause internal corruption or rapid foul decay to signify a soul being consumed before death. The enduring mystery. The house on Mahogany Street remains a chilling testament to the power of place. Was Alara's death the result of an extremely rare, undiagnosed medical condition that happened to occur in a house with a bad reputation? Or was it, as the Abulerio and the neighbors believed, a simple case of trespass against an ancient territorial spirit who demanded the ultimate price for the audacity of a new beginning? The physical evidence, maggots emerging without wounds, pushes the needle decisively toward the supernatural. It leaves us with the unsettling thought that sometimes a piece of paper and a title deed are meaningless. The true ownership of the land is settled by something that has been there for generations, something that cannot be seen, touched, or negotiated with, and it will always collect its rent. Before we move on to the next tale of darkness and dread, I want to take a moment to ask you to share your own stories. If you have a personal encounter with a Filipino myth, a dark historical mystery, or a haunting from your own family, we want to hear it. You can visit us at storiesphilippines.com to share your experience, either to be self-narrated or to be written and told here on the podcast. We believe that by sharing these tales, we keep the folklore alive and acknowledge the unseen world that surrounds us. Also, if you enjoyed the deep dive into the history and the chilling atmosphere we craft here, please consider supporting the podcast. You can find links in the show notes for ways to support us financially, including our Patreon and other platforms. Supporters gain access to exclusive content, including extended ad-free episodes, early access to new releases, live shows, and more. Your support helps us keep the lights and the microphones on. Check out our new website at storiesphilippines.com for all the updates and additional content. Remember to follow us on social media, like, subscribe, and share this episode with friends who appreciate a good chilling story from the archipelago. Rest in peace, Ilara. Your family loves you, and your story will not be forgotten. We'll be right back with more stories from the dark heart of the Philippines.